Hello, hello. How are we doing this afternoon? Hopefully good. The theme for today, right? We're doing banana bread. I have the recipe down below. If you wanna bake along with us, there's some prep stuff to this one, so you might wanna just watch the video and then do it afterwards, and you can always watch it again later. However you decide to do this. I have a couple things like working already, and I'll explain what I do have done, and then we'll talk about all the science behind it. And this is a really, really great recipe. I don't know about you guys, but I keep bananas in the house for the boys. I like bananas myself, but I don't like to eat bananas past like yellow stage. I am a big fan of bananas that are underripe, I guess you would say. So these ones here, we're looking for very ripe bananas if you're making this banana bread. So very ripe bananas are really brown speckled. That's what we're looking for here. So these bananas here would actually be perfect for this. But what I often do is, because I don't eat bananas at this stage when they're like really ripe, I'll put my bananas in the freezer once they get like a couple of brown spots on them, and then I'll pull them out to make this banana bread with this recipe when I have like a collection of them. So we were going through our downstairs freezer to see what all we had, where everything was, and what all we had in our freezer and in our pantries. And we had something like 20 bananas downstairs. So it was time to make some banana bread. Anyway, so that's what we're making today. And we'll get started, okay? First thing you want to do, obviously, is I'm going to wash my hands. So I don't know about anybody else, but I've started like in all of my bathrooms, I have a thing of lotion next to my soap dispenser too. My hands are so dry from washing all the time. It's something that I have at school, so I always have lotion in my like office and on my desk, because being a culinary teacher, you wash your hands so much that your hands just become so super dry. So I'm just we keeping lotion everywhere. Not right now, but if you have that, make sure you're lotioning along with it to keep your hands nice and soft. Okay, so hands are washed. So the first thing I'm going to do is preheat my oven to 350 degrees. I have done that already. You can do this two different ways. So if you're going to make a loaf, like a banana bread loaf, which is what we're going to be making today, you can use a regular loaf pan, and that would be at 350 degrees Fahrenheit for your oven. You could also, if you wanted to, do muffins with this recipe. I would use muffin liners. So I would get my muffin tin ready. I would use my muffin liners in there. And then same idea. You want to boost your oven temperature up to 400. And the reason why is because we want to have a bit more rise and a quick rise to our muffins rather than our loaf of bread. When you're doing a loaf, you're looking for more of an even rise across the whole thing. You don't want like a super dome. But with a muffin, you want that really nice top. So raising that temperature up is going to create a chemical reaction faster than if you were to keep that lower temperature at 350. So that's one thing you want to keep in mind there. In order to get our pan ready, what we are going to do is we're going to spray our loaf pan. I'm just going to show you. We want to get all over. So we want to make sure this is well sprayed. And then I'm a believer in the spray and flour method. There are some recipes that you would it because you need the batter to climb up the walls. With spraying and flouring here, essentially what we're doing is we're giving them the batter something to climb up the walls, but we don't want it to stick to it at all. That's one of the issues that we have. So I think of this as just a little insurance. So I'm going to put some spray on my pan, and then I'm just going to tap the pan all around. Just like that. And once I'm pretty covered on the sides, I can just tap this right out into my garbage. if you were doubling this recipe or doing more than one loaf pan or whatever it was, go from pan to pan to pan with your flour. That way you're not wasting any. So spray all of your pans down, then put flour in one and then tap it into the next pan. That way you can just kind of keep using it. All right, so my pan's all ready to go. So I'll put that off to the side. And what we're going to do is we're going to measure our ingredients into our large bowl. So I'm going to get from here, we're looking for 1 3/4 cups of flour. So we're going to use our scoop and scrape technique. I'm going to just fix this over here. I'm going to switch that up. We're going to use our scoop and scrape technique. So we want to make sure that we have an even amount of ingredients, right? Baking is science. We want to make sure that when we are baking, we are being as precise as possible with our measurements, okay? So there's my 1 cup. Very good. And then I have my 1/2 cup up here. I'm going to go with 3 of these guys. So I have my 1/4 cup here. And so instead of doing 3/4 of a cup, I can just do 3 of those. It's nice and easy. Make sure you say hi if you're watching through the live chat. I always want to know who's watching us, who's having fun. Okay, so that's 2, and here's my 3rd 1/4 cup. So I've got 1 3/4 cups of all-purpose flour. Okay, so that's going to go right there. Perfect. To the side. All righty. Then I need a teaspoon of baking soda. So remember, baking soda is a leavening agent. This one is going to give us a nice even rise. So a teaspoon of baking soda. Put this back here. And I'm looking for 1/2 teaspoon of table salt. 1/2 teaspoon of table salt, which I have right here. Anytime I'm measuring something like, like this kind of container, I'm going to measure over top of something else just to make sure I don't have any issues. Okay. So then I'm just going to check this here, and I'm going to put this into my flour mixture. Okay, so now I'm going to take it, I'm going to whisk all of these dry ingredients together. And whisking these dry ingredients together is essentially going to add air. It's going to add a little volume to it. It's like sifting. And then it's going to also distribute my ingredients equally or evenly. Okay, so I have that together. I can put that off to the side. Now, this recipe is a little bit complex in terms of what you're doing with all of the bananas. But I have to tell you, it's one of the best recipes that I've ever used for banana bread. It has the best flavor. I can't say enough about it. Okay. So essentially what I did here, because I did do some of this ahead of time, you can see the bananas right there, is if you're using ripe bananas, I'm going to explain this 2 ways. So if you're using ripe bananas, you're going to place 5 bananas in like a microwave safe bowl like you see right here. And you're going to cover it with plastic, pop a couple holes in it, put it in the microwave for about 5 minutes. What you're trying to do is get the liquid out of those bananas. And that liquid is where all the flavor is for this banana bread. Okay, that's what makes this banana bread so different and so much better and richer in flavor than other banana breads. You're then going to transfer it to a strainer. You're going to transfer those bananas to a strainer, and you're just going to let them sit for about 15 minutes. So that's what I've done already. I did frozen bananas. So like I said, I had all these frozen bananas. So if you're going to do that, you want to just thaw them, and then you're going to do the same exact thing. Put them in the strainer, and then allow that liquid to to drain out of the bananas. Okay. So once we have the liquid drained out of our bananas, I'm just going to kind of do a little bit of that. We have the liquid all down here. And now what we're going to do, we're looking for about a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup. I'd say that's pretty good for a half a cup. We're going to take and we're going to pour this liquid that we've drained off of our bananas, and we're going to pour it into a saucepan. Then what we're going to do is we're going to reduce that to about 1/4 of a cup. Depending on how much you have in there is about how long it's going to take. We just, like I said, want to get it down to 1/4 of a cup. So I'm going to take and put this on my stove, and we're going to spin around here. I can't guarantee how good you're going to be able to see this, but I'll do my best here. So I'm going to take and turn this on. And we're going to get this up to a boil and reduce it down to 1/4 of a cup. So I'm going to spin this around. You can see right into the pan there. Okay. And I'll show you what we're looking for and when it gets down to about 1/4 of a cup. It won't take very long for that to actually happen. All right. So one of the things I do if I'm wondering how much something should look like is I'll take a measuring cup, and I can do this for the purposes of what we're doing right now. We're kind of guesstimating at 1/4 of a cup. You can take something like this. So I have a 1/4 cup measure here, and I can fill this up with water, and I can see about how much that looks like. Because a lot of people are like, how do I know what 1/4 of a cup looks like? So you kind of have to figure out what that amount is. So I'm just going to take a little bowl right here, and I'm going to take and pour my 1/4 cup of water into here. And I can kind of see that if I tilt you over again, we'll go this way. Okay, you can kind of see this is the amount of liquid that I'm looking for. So if I'm looking inside of my pan here, I can see I definitely have more than that amount of liquid in there. So I just need to reduce it down a little bit more. You can see inside of there. And we're looking for this to come up to a boil, a nice vigorous boil, and reduce down. Now, reducing means that we are evaporating some of the moisture content out of this liquid from the bananas. I'll take a second, stop and say, hi, Amber. How are you? Thank you so much for joining. It's so nice to hear from you. I miss you guys so much. I want to go back to school. That's my life. You guys are awesome. I miss you. All right, so here we go. We're getting a nice rapid boil inside of our saucepan here. Now, because there's so much sugar in bananas, you can see that the color, if I let the liquid get up to the side there, the color gets brown really quickly. And essentially what's happening there is caramelization. So the sugars are caramelizing as they begin to cook. So like I said, this really isn't going to take very long. The other thing you'll notice is when things are reducing, that they are going to get a little thicker. So because we're taking the moisture out and leaving the sugars behind, it will get thicker without that liquid content in there, that water content. All right, so we're just about there already. Okay, let's let it go just a hair longer. We'll measure it out into our 1/4 cup, and then we should be good to go. And I just keep taking it off of the stove because I don't want to let it boil over, obviously. Something that we have talked about in class in terms of dairy, but that can also happen with sugar and other liquid ingredients while you're cooking them. So I'm just going to let this go a little bit more. My water content's getting pretty low here. I don't want to let this burn because this will be a mess to clean, and I need that liquid. So once those bubbles go away, we'll be able to see about how much we have left there. And one of the other reasons that we're reducing this down is we're concentrating the flavor. When we boil off some of that water and some of that moisture, it allows us to really concentrate the banana flavor that we're looking for. And that's the secret to making this delicious banana bread recipe. Alrighty, so there we go. We're almost there. Got a nice boil up again. Looks great. Okay, so I'm going to turn this off. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer this and my bananas to my medium bowl that was catching all of my liquid. Now in the, so I'm going to take and just push this out here into my bowl. All right. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the liquid that I just reduced down. Now, if we want to be real specific, we can pour this into here. You can see I have almost exactly a 1/4 cup of liquid left over. That's perfect, okay? So I'm going to add this back into my banana. All right, back into my banana. And again, I know like I'm a stickler for using a liquid measuring cup for the purposes of what we're doing. Adding that liquid back in, we're just looking to get about a 1/4 cup of liquid. So I'm not stressing too much about the fact that I was using a dry measuring cup or anything. If it's a precise measurement, you know, then we really want to be precise. All right, so we want to get this mixed into our bananas. And the other thing we want to do is we want to mash our bananas down. So I am going to use a potato masher in order to mash this banana. I want a really nice, smooth mixture in order to use in my batter, okay? I want to get this as smooth as I can. I mean, it's not going to be perfectly smooth, and that's actually kind of nice. What we'll have is a you know, like some nice banana chunks in there if it isn't perfectly smooth. Alrighty, then we'll mix this in. Okay. And then once that's all mixed together and nice and mashed up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to scrape this off. And I'm going to add in the rest of my liquid ingredients. So because you can tell I did my dry ingredients first and then I did my wet ingredients, you know that I am using the muffin method here, right? Muffin method incorporates dry separately, wet separately, and then brings them together. With the purpose that we don't want to over mix when we bring them together. We don't want to develop too much gluten. And we're going to talk about it in a second in terms of tunneling and why this method of mixing is so important, okay? So to my wet ingredients here, I'm going to add 8 tablespoons or a stick of melted butter. I melted it and let it cool slightly. So that's going to come in here. And then I'm also going to add, and I can do this one at a time, 2 eggs. So to a flat surface, I'm going to crack into my bowl here. And I'm going to dump in there. And again, a separate bowl, you want to crack on a flat surface. I'm doing that with one hand, but you guys can use 2 thumbs, press in, pull apart. And that's going to go in there as well. And then I do need 3/4 cup of light brown sugar. And I'll show you how I'm going to go about measuring that. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in 3/4 cup of light brown sugar here. This is going to help keep our banana bread really, really nice and soft. So you'll notice that inside of my container here, I have a piece of bread. So I always keep a piece of bread in my brown sugar container to make sure that it's nice and soft. It stays nice and soft. And what that has to do with is water activity and the transfer of moisture from one thing to another. So essentially by keeping my slice of bread in here, I'm keeping an equilibrium inside of my container. I do need to eventually trade out the slice of bread in order to keep that moisture content equal throughout my container, because eventually it does start to evaporate out, even though it is an airtight container. Every time I open it up, that air is getting in there and then it starts to dry out the brown sugar. So we're looking for 3/4 cup of light brown sugar. Remember that with light brown sugar or brown sugars in general, you're going to pack them. So there's 1. Okay, let me make sure I don't have any like hard pieces. No, that's good. Okay, that's 2. And remember, brown sugar is, regular granulated sugar with the molasses added back in, or some of the molasses. Light brown sugar has less molasses than dark brown sugar. And there's 3. Okay, I'll put this off to the side. And then our last ingredient that we're going to add in here is a teaspoon of vanilla. A teaspoon teaspoon of vanilla. Let me wash my hands again. So that teaspoon of vanilla is just going to add a little bit of flavoring, and just keep in mind that when you're using vanilla, it does not have the flavor that you would have until you've actually baked it. You have to bake off or heat up some of the alcohol that's used in order to get the extract to taste the way you're going to have it taste. I'm just going to put that there for a second. So it does call for whisking these ingredients together. And I would like to do this because I do want to incorporate a little bit of air into this as I'm doing it. Okay. It's going to help keep our bread nice and light and fluffy. Okay, so we're going to whisk that together vigorously, make sure all of our ingredients are really well combined. And then I am going to switch back to my straight spatula when I'm going to put this into my flour mixture. So again, we're doing the muffin method here. So now what we're going to do is pour the wet into the dry and just bring it together. We do not want to overmix this. Otherwise, it's going to wind up being very tough. And then we're going to have something called tunneling. So tunneling is when you see in muffins, and you can see them in loaves too, but they'll have these gaps. And what that is the creation of gluten. So around it, it's going to be very tough. And on the inside, it's going to have tunnels. When you're making breads like, sourdough bread or sandwich bread, you might see some of that tunneling. We don't want to have that here. We want to keep it as evenly crumbed as possible. All right, here we go. I'm going to take and put my wet ingredients into my dry ingredients. And then, again, I'm just going to bring these together. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to mix too much because I want to make sure that they are just evenly mixed. Just streaks of flour left. Okay, nothing crazy. Now, if you wanted to, you could add walnuts to this. You could add an optional amount of walnuts, or you can optionally add walnuts. And you'd want to do this just after you mix this together and you get those streaks of flour. Okay. So again, we're just bringing this together. Just getting it to the point where there's a few streaks of flour left. And then we're going to stop mixing because we do not want to overmix this. It'll create tunnels and it'll make our banana bread tough. If you've ever had a muffin that's kind of tough, a little dense, has holes in it, that's an overmixed muffin. This is perfect. Okay, so just like that. Now what I'm going to do is bring my pan over here. I'm going to pour this into my pan. And once I have this in my pan, I do want to level it out just a little bit, make sure it's nice and even. This is an 8.5 by a 4.5 loaf pan. That's what the recipe calls for. If you do use a 9 by 5, you want to make sure that you have, take it out and check it about 5 minutes before it says to normally check it, because it would be a little lower in the pan. There wouldn't be as much, there'd be more surface area. And not as thick as an 8.5 by 4.5. Okay, so I have that nicely evened out in my pan. I'll show you that in just 1 second. All right, so this is what we're looking for within the pan. Try and just get that in there for you. All right, so that's what we're looking for. And then we're going to sprinkle some sugar on top of it. Now, the recipe calls for granulated sugar, but I happen to have some sugar in the raw, which is just a thicker, unrefined turbinado cane sugar. So I'm going to use this in order to sprinkle it on top because it's going to give it a really nice crisp crust. We'll just take and I'll sprinkle a little bit of this over. If you had another ripe banana, you could actually shingle that over top
of the banana bread and then put the sugar on top of that. It's not my favorite thing to do. I find that the banana goes bad after a few days. Whereas the banana bread itself will hold up a little longer than if you put the fresh banana on top before baking. Okay, so this is all ready to go. So this is going to go into the oven for 55 to 75 minutes. And that variation has to do with how much moisture was left over in your bananas or how much liquid was in those bananas to begin with, and how much didn't get released. So you have to get all that moisture out of there to have it completely cook through. You're going to bake it for 55 to 75 minutes or until a toothpick comes out clean. So start looking at it at 55 minutes, check it with a toothpick, and then if it needs more time, add from there. Then you're going to cool it for 15 minutes before taking it out of the pan and finish cooling it completely on a wire rack. The same thing for the muffins as far as the toothpick goes, but you're going to bake them for about 15 minutes. And again, you want to up the temperature of the oven to 400 degrees when you're making the muffins. Check them with a toothpick, make sure it comes out clean. And then same thing, you want to let them cool, then put them to a wire rack to finish cooling completely, and then enjoy them. Both of these do really, really well being frozen. So if you want to bake them and then freeze them, you can. I've even cut off slices individually and toasted them, and they come out really nice that way. So banana bread, I hope you guys enjoy it. I'm going to get mine into the oven and have a great rest of this kind of not so great dreary day, right? I hope to see you again soon. I'll talk to you guys and be well. Thanks. Bye.